Oh, hey, look there, Ben. How you doing, buddy?
Morning, Eric. How you doing?
Good morning. Is it morning for you though? It's not, is it?
No, it's 6 o'clock
It's 6 o'clock.
in the
Obviously, I
evening.
would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be eating dinner. Like, no, I'm doing dinner. So I'm so glad you're here, though. We are going to be talking about your stuff today. So I'm pretty excited about that. If you're watching us on Twitch, you're actually not today. We're only doing YouTube because there was a preempted. There's an all-day thing going on with our mobile event. So we're just on YouTube today. So if you watch this later, you watch this later. So I'm sorry. I hope we got the message out as best we could. So Ben, I'm going to go through some of this stuff on our deck here, so we can show people what's coming up here.
Cool.
I am Eric Johnson, Principal Developer Advocate for AWS Serverless. Ben, you want to tell them about you?
Sure. I'm on Eric's team, also developer advocate, although not principal, just a mere senior. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. You generally go, so your Twitter handle is Benjamin. Do you go by Benjamin or do you go by Ben?
Ben, but
Okay.
it's quite hard to get anything Ben Smith on the internet. They're all taken.
I understand. Eric Johnson, the famous guitar player, has taken everything of mine.
Yeah.
So yes, I am the lesser known drummer, and nobody cares. So there you go. Yes, so we are from the AWS Serverless team. We are both developer advocates, and we love doing this. So this last week, if you missed it, I got to meet with Rick Houlihan. Rick Houlihan. If you're not familiar, Rick Houlihan talks faster than your ears are capable of listening. So last week we took and slowed Rick down to half speed. That's not true. I just kept interrupting and go, Rick, say it slower. Rick, say it slower. And we talked about DynamoDB, covered a lot of great things, answered a lot of great questions. So I had a great time. I encourage you to check that out here on the Serverless Land YouTube channel. We have that in our Serverless Office Hours playlist. So I encourage you to go back and check that out if you can. Here's some things coming out. Ben, did you see Lambda extensions are now generally available? Yeah.
Yes, I did. And I saw Julian dropped all sorts of information on that in all sorts of channels yesterday in one go. Yeah, there's a whole learning path on serverless land, I think, already.
There is, or coming. It's either there or coming. Yeah. Is it there? All right, excellent. Julian is our extensions expert. I'm working through. It's kind of funny if you're not familiar with Lambda extensions. There's a lot you can do with it. I think initially it's like, well, you'll be able to connect with third parties, maybe write your logs off. You can run inside the process, outside the process. Lots of things there. But as I'm starting to build applications, like I'm building a proof of concept on doing some statistics gathering from different places, and I was thinking, man, there's all kinds of uses for extensions. And so it's very cool to have this. This I don't know if you've seen. I know Ben, you have, but folks out there, if you've seen the plugin or the extension for running app config, where it runs outside and it will get configuration updates every 5 minutes, and your Lambda has that change at every invocation. So I was thinking doing some stuff like I don't know, statistics, tokens, all kinds of things. So. Another big one that came out is Amazon EventBridge now supports sharing events between buses or bus to bus. James Bezic has put out a lot of stuff on that, so I encourage you to check that out. Lots of good. There's a lot of power in being able to move those events around to different buses, how you classify them, things like that. And then the other new one is the Amplify Hosting announces server-side rendering. Have you done any of that yet, Ben?
I haven't. I barely caught that, and I can't believe that didn't come like bigger on my radar because I love using Amplify. So definitely want to have a play with that. Ben and James are probably our best developers on our team. I'm the I learn from these guys constantly. So Ben is kind of Ben and James are the mastermind behind Serverless Land and what's going on there, and so lots of great stuff coming out there. All right. So next thing we got here, some recent serverless blogs that came out. Again, the performance functionality improvements. Julian put that out. Bus to bus with James. Last week we had EventBridge service integration for AWS step functions. We're going to be talking about this next week, actually.
And it is actually an event bridge integration so you can talk to event bridge buses with a step function. And then, of course, now you can go from that bus to another bus. So all kinds of things going on. I think your blogs they're out there enough that we're not seeing the start learning serverless or getting serverless on these anymore. So, but that's all right. We've got a link to it. If you're not familiar with the serverless patterns collection, if you're new to serverless and you want to get started with serverless, this is a great place to start. Serverless land itself is a great place to start, and then on serverless land are these patterns where you can see, how do I go from API gateway to a Lambda function? How do I go from Lambda to an event bridge, or vice versa, or DynamoDB or things like that? So you choose the source target, and then it'll give you different. The source, and then it'll give you different targets that we have a template for, and then you can use that template right in your application. And this is what we're here to talk about today. Ben, I'm going to turn it over to you. Kind of give the elevator pitch of what this is. Ben, I think you're muted, buddy, or we lost you.
Thank you.
There you are.
Back in the game.
Yeah.
So this is essentially a series of content which consists of blogs and code samples and soon videos, which is targeted directly at developers that are completely new to serverless. So at AWS, we have loads of great content for learning serverless technologies, but not actually a lot of new content on getting started, people that are completely green, completely new, and even less content directly to developers. So what I mean by that is that it's focused on building from your IDE, from your local machine, because that's where most developers spend the majority of their time building.
Right.
It's focused on a real application that adds value straight away. So getting your hands on code, editing something, deploying something, and learning by doing, straight away. And it's 100 level. So the first even mention any services, even though you're already coding in it. So that's what I think is really interesting about this way of doing something. That's actually my challenge to you, Eric, for the next 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay.
Is to try not to mention a single AWS service as we talk about getting started with serverless.
Challenge accepted.
Good.
There's a lot of stuff, right? If you think about serverless, even before you get into our services, I agree. But there's a lot of knowledge to learn. I mean, it's like a pipeline or a culvert coming at you, full of data. Is that the right use of that? Would you say? That's
pretty good use. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. All righty. All righty. All right. So with that, I think we're going to jump in, and we're getting started with serverless. I'm going to bring your screen on. Are you ready?
Yes, please.
It's the right screen. It's not your bank account or anything, right?
Okay. No, that's the one. It's all set up.
All right. There you go. All righty. All right.
Okay, so when I started out on this particular content series, what I didn't want to do was kind of regurgitate the same stuff that you hear every person in AWS say when they talk about, or they get asked, what is serverless, or what is serverless for developers? Because typically you'll hear stuff like undifferentiated heavy lifting, scaling automatically, and all that's true, right? But it's not exactly the language or the value that before I joined AWS as a developer, I didn't think I was doing any heavy lifting. I was just building stuff, right? So that didn't speak to me as a developer. So what I actually did was I asked people back in March, I said, serverless developers, what does serverless mean to you, right? And I think some of the answers is really interesting and quite telling. So I've just picked a couple of them. I've got about 100 responses because the serverless community is so brilliant. So look, here's one. Just put my code to work. Don't care where the server is. Code is a liability. How little code can I write by taking advantage of managed services?
That's right.
Focus on the code, secure and easily scalable. Not having to do a ton of work and maintenance. Easier to build things. The lowest barrier to entry to running a piece of code in the cloud. Less code equals less stuff to go wrong. So that's again alluding to the whole code is a liability thing, right? Portability of code, empowered development. I really like that. So when all you're doing as a developer is building and not doing the undifferentiated heavy lifting. I can't believe I'm the one that's already said that twice, by the way. Then You are empowered.
You lost. I won.
Yeah.
Let's just throw that out there.
1-0. Yeah.
Okay.
Not having to manage resources, not worrying about anything other than code. Power to know I can do anything in the AWS platform. Trust external services. So there's this whole idea of a mindset where you lean on managed services rather than build something yourself with code, right? It means I have to deal with servers less. See what he's done there. Developing global enterprise scale apps with ease. Nothing to do with lack of servers to me. Something is serverless when a application has to rely on other technology. Okay, someone else said that. I think this is really good. For 2 or more components to communicate with each other. That's basically the serverless patterns library that you just showed, right?
That's right. Yeah.
That's exactly what it's for. Sorry, Eric, go on.
Well, I love this, and I know I don't want to interrupt your flow here, but I love this idea, and I've said this in several talks that I've given. I said the most brittle part of an Eric Johnson application is Eric Johnson's code. There's just no two way. That's where it's going to go south, right? And so I kind of live by this mantra. Said this: if all else fails, then code. But use these services and this kind of chaining together of services before I ever code it. And I love seeing that. It's kind of, I feel validated here. I feel seen.
Exactly. Well, that comes up time and time again, right? More focus on business logic, less on DevOps.
That's right.
Simplicity of sorts. Do not have to provision and maintain servers. So this is just a selection, but essentially you can generalize what people said into 3 things, right? They want to build something as quickly as possible. They want to write just the business logic, and they want it to scale on its own. That's what it comes down to on all those different responses. So that's what this content series has been built for, to explain how best to do that using serverless technologies, and to do that by giving a live example that developers can interact with and extend all from their IDE. So we don't go into the AWS Management Console, not at one point. It can be useful, of course, for learning serverless, the console, but ultimately you end up building in your IDE. So why not just start there, right, from the outset?
Right. I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
The application that you build in this 3-part blog series, it does this. It takes an action from GitHub, such as when somebody stars one of your repositories, and it grabs that sort of inbound webhook, that inbound API. It does some sort of computation on it to round up some of the data in your sort of stats of your repository that's being starred, and then it outputs an alert to a Slack channel, right? That's what our serverless app is doing that this blog series walks you through. Now, you'll see on AWS blog posts, or any serverless blog post really about serverless, something like this, right? Diagram that's explaining an application with a bunch of services and arrows and like all sorts of different labels. And this is correct. And this is actually quite a simple serverless app diagram, right? But if you're brand new to serverless, this is probably a bit unnecessary, a bit confusing, okay? So another way to draw exactly the same app is this, right? You have GitHub, you have Slack, and there's something serverless, which is the arrow in between, which is connecting one to the other. And this is similar to somebody's definition of serverless, right? Connect one thing to another thing based on an event. I think it's a really good way to do your first serverless project.
All right, so let me stop you there. I want to ask you a question, okay? So we talk about serverless, and you just mentioned something that in itself kind of can be confusing or I think kind of blows people who are brand new to it, and that's event, right? An event happened, right? And this is very different, and I think serverless isn't the only model to kind of be event-driven, but it is, I mean, it's kind of, that defines it in a lot of ways. Do you run into developers, as we talk to them, and I know I do, but do you run into developers that this event-driven model kind of?
Yeah, I mean, because most developers are used to building monolith application where the whole logic is in one big code base, and you can't sort of narrow something down to a single event where some data comes into one point and goes out of another point. And so the event is the the literal point in time when that thing occurs, and then the data that's contained within that event is the thing that you act upon, right?
Right.
So it is something different at first, but it's not difficult at all, I don't think.
No, once you kind of get your mind wrapped around that, I agree with you. But sometimes this my server's always up and running. It's listening on port 9925.3. I made a radio station out of it, and that's a very different way of thinking than I'm not doing anything. Sorry, I just whacked my mic. I'm not doing anything until this happens. So it's kind of like, and I'm going to use a buzzword here. It's kind of scale to zero. Nothing's going on. Only pay for when you're actually using it, and that's the event.
That's right. That's the one of the things we haven't even mentioned, right? Serverless service, you should only pay for the discrete moment that it's doing something for you, and the rest of the time you're not paying for it. And that's why essentially it's based on events, right? Because that's the event that you're paying for, the bit of computation. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so this is the blog series, right? This is how it's laid out. So in part one, you deploy straight away from your IDE this application that I just showed you, which takes an event from GitHub and outputs it to Slack. So you deploy that straight away. You have that code in your local IDE to straight away look at and manipulate and play around with. And it explains all the different reasons why using serverless is useful for developers, all the different problems that it solves that we've spoken about and we asked on Twitter, right? Then in blog post 2, we look at the business logic, the code that you write. Where does that go? What service is used to run that? Hint, it's in the diagram here. And why is it useful to use this service? So that's what we look at in blog post 2. And in blog post 3, we look at how do you open this business logic to the world? So what service can you use to then say, okay, I want to run that business logic based on this event, like the front door to your application, if you like. Okay.
Right.
So that's the short link to the blog series, right? And the GitHub repository that is linked to it. But what I thought I'd do is go through that blog series, build this application. I don't think it will take long because I've done it before. So
Hold on, you're going to do this live? You're going to code live? This isn't a video.
We'll give it a go. Yeah. No, it's not
okay.
a video because it's not because there'll be lots of mistakes, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's useful, no?
Yeah, no, I think it's very useful. Just not a lot of folks will do it. I do it, but then I copy and paste a lot of my code. You'll probably type in or something. Yeah. So no, I love it. Well, I think live demo, and I think that's what people come for. I love this idea.
Well, we're all friends, so you guys can help me when I get stuff wrong. The last 2 serverless office hours I did, I got stuck on the live coding, and the chat was helping me out. So great. It's like real life.
Yeah, those are the best. Pair programming.
Afterwards. Yeah. Okay, so this is the blog post part 1, right? So why do developers need serverless? We talk about
can you blow that up just a bit? It's a little hard to read.
Yes, I can zoom in here a little bit.
All right.
What I'm not going to do here is I'm not going to read this out or like go into this. The blog post is there to be read in your own time sort of thing. I'm going to focus on the code because that's what I think is more valuable for this live session, right? So I'm going to scroll straight down to the instructions on how to set this up. Okay. So the first thing it talks about is having a GitHub account. And in your GitHub account, you need some sort of channel. And in your, not GitHub, Slack. In your Slack account, you need a Slack channel. And you need to set up something in Slack called a webhook integration, right? You need to grab a webhook URL. That webhook URL is what you use in your application to post out to Slack. So let's do that first. Give me a little go here. Here we go. Here's Slack. Here's my Slack channel. I believe I set this up by going here and going to, where is it? Add apps. And then I can add an incoming webhook. I have to configure that. Oh, it's gone for a new browser. Brilliant.
I want you to know that Mark Starkart, if I say it, Mark Starkart said Control-C, Control-V is typing it out. So I am validated as a developer. So there you go.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. Okay, so here I'm adding add incoming webhook integration to one of my Slack channels. So I pick my Slack channel. I just hit this button. and it's given me the webhook URL that I need to use.
Nice.
Now I'm going to just copy this and close that down because I don't think I need that anymore. Oh, close it down too many times. Go back to Slack. Okay. What I might do actually is just pop that in my Slack channel so I can refer back to it later. Okay. I'm going to go back to my my blog post. So I've done this. Next bit is to clone the application, the repository, right? My serverless application that contains a bit of business logic. And look, Control C, Control V.
So I have a question real quick, Ben. I'm going to interrupt you. Do you need to be a Slack admin to add the webhook? You do, right?
I suppose you do, but I just created a free, just signed up for Slack, made a new channel, did it on my own, personal Slack thing, just to play around, just to learn it. Yeah. So
if you're using like the corporate one, like we use Slack here at AWS, you would need to be an admin or have the admin add that for you.
Where am I? Oh, looks like I'm in the trash or something here. Hang on, let me go here.
We're getting some debate. John Walsh says no, you don't. So we'll need to.
There you go.
We'll need to check that out. So all right. Okay. John's smarter than I am. I can already validate that. So that may
John knows his Slack. Okay, so I've just done a git clone on the repository, right? My serverless getting started example repository. That's downloaded this part 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to change directory into part 1.
Yeah, and can you blow that one up a little bit too?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, sir. Yeah, that's
going on.
Yeah, if you need to back down one, that's fine. But that was
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
I've just downloaded my app. I've changed directory into part 1. Now I'm just going to deploy it, and I'm still not going to talk about what services are involved yet, right? Because all I've done is a git clone, set up a thing on Slack with a webhook integration. So let's go back to my code. I wonder what that was. Okay, the other thing, I am just going to copy and paste actually, because I think less chance of things going wrong, isn't it?
Yeah, no shame there, buddy. No shame.
Okay, so I need to give it a name. I'm going to call it Sam. Actually, I call it Serverless Office Hours Example. US1, my region. Okay, so the first thing it needs is that Slack URL. That's the webhook URL that I just generated in Slack, right? So I have to go back in here and I'll just grab this again. Oops, didn't mean to click on that. Excuse me.
I'm marking every time you make a mistake. I have a tick that I'm doing.
Fair enough.
If that helps, yeah.
Send it to the boss. There we go. Put that in there. I'm just going to accept all the defaults here. Yes. Okay, so what this is doing, Eric's actually the subject matter expert for this particular service. But this is actually just deploying my application into my AWS account using a command line interface, right?
Yep. Couple things.
Give more information.
Yeah. What I would note on this is the first thing it's doing is creating a change set. You see all the green up there where it's saying, "Here's what I'm gonna do." That's actually CloudFormation's doing that. And then what it's going to do is now Ben told that he didn't want to confirm it. You can actually tell Sam you want to confirm it. And what it does is, hey, this is the cloud. This is the change set. Do you want me to deploy that change set? Yes, I do. So now it's actually in the middle of deploying. Now, Ben, I did notice that you actually tell it what configuration file you want to save it to.
Yes.
Do you change different names?
No, I gave it a configuration file slightly outside of this directory so we can use the same one for part 2 and part 3.
Very clever. Yeah. Very clever. Yeah. John Walsh says I'm pretty darn smart. So I'm just throwing that out there. My wife would disagree with him probably, but he did say that. So.
Okay, that's deployed, right? So now I'm going to switch back over to Google Chrome and to the repository. And so now this is the repository that I'm going to set up an action for that will post to Slack when somebody stars it, right? So I'm going to do that on the Getting Started repository. From my settings here, I'm going to go to, I think it's webhooks. And I'm going to, add a webhook? That would make sense. Oh dear, my password.
Yes, his password is 8 asterisks.
I haven't typed that in for a few months. Okay, I'm going to choose the JSON as the content type. And I'm going to select this to post to my serverless application on a specific event. And that event will be not on a push. It will be on a star. I'm going to use a star as a repository, this one here. And here is the URL that I'm going to tell GitHub to post to, right? And that's been generated by my deployment. And it's one of the outputs from this deployment stack here. So I'm just going to copy that and go back to GitHub, and I can paste that in.
All right, so we have a question here, and I think it's what you just did. Alper said, so Lambda will post the generated Slack webhook URL when an event happens, or post to the generated Slack webhook URL?
That's what's happening. Yeah.
Got a thumbs up from Ben. Yep.
Yeah, and I'll show you all that in just a minute.
All right.
He's way ahead of us. Okay, so we'll add that in. There it is. Right. Now, when I star my repository,
John Walsh did a little search for us, so there you go. He can only add it to once he's has permissions to. So there you go. Sorry,
so
Ben,
here's
I didn't interrupt you.
No, you're good. Here's that Slack channel. Look, I just starred my repository. There you go. It's posted directly in. That's my serverless app done, working, right? That's blog
so
post
cool,
1.
Dude. Yeah.
Okay, so that's blog post 1. Blog post 2 is about editing the business logic and looking at where that business logic is, right? So let's go ahead and do that. Now we're digging into the actual nuts and bolts of this application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to CD into part 2 because it's a little bit more involved. So this is an application built in Node.js. And this is actually the first time we've managed to go. How long have we gone already, Eric?
We're at 27 minutes, and I have not said anything. You have 2 against you, but I am clean. And
you said scale to 0, so we're 2-1.
Yeah. Well, no, I did. Yeah, but I preempted it with I'm going to say a buzzword, kind of like I'll do.
Okay,
so
fair
like
enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So now we're allowed to say Lambda. We're now allowed to say AWS Lambda because I'm going to show the AWS Lambda function code. Right?
All right.
And actually what I'm going to do is this might be useful time to refer a little bit to the blog post here. We've already on part 2 now, the business logic. So one of the great things about using Lambda is that you can separate the business logic from all the other things that you would usually write into your code in your monolith application, right? And so they're listed here, some of the things, the authorization layer, the notification layer, the app integration, the routine logic. All that is now handed off to managed services with serverless applications. And you're just writing the business logic in your Lambda function. And your Lambda function is similar to pretty much any other. What are you laughing at?
This is 30 to 15 if we're using tennis scoring. So
yeah,
that's funny.
Get it up to deuce. So your Lambda function is just a program, right? Similar to other programs. It has an input, it processes that input, and it returns an output. Now, the way your Lambda function works is that input is saved in the first argument of your function handler. And I'm not going to go too much into like the anatomy of your Lambda function. There's something called a function handler. It's nicely explained in this blog post, but essentially it's the method or the function that starts running when your Lambda code is executing, right? Yeah. And handed into that is the input. So in this case, the input is the GitHub webhook payload. That's handed into our Lambda function. And if I go back to our Lambda function here in the code, where is my Lambda start? Here it is, handler event. So here's the input. I do some JSON parsing. I save some variables. I start to create the message that will eventually be saved to Slack, compose it in a nice format, sort of data transform it in a way that Slack will appreciate and understand how to output. And then I use an NPM package called Axios to make a post request to that Slack URL, right? So the actual function code here is pretty straightforward. Now, in my my Slack application, on my Slack channel, what that posted was not a lot of information. So what we can do is we make that a bit more rich. We can add some stuff to that, right? And what the example has you adding is actually, let's look at Google Chrome. We'll go back to the webhook. So that's something I can do is I can look at that webhook that I just set up in GitHub, and I can look at the actual delivery that just went out, and I can look at the payload that just went out. This is all the information that is already going to be available to me in Lambda, right? I can pull out all of this.
See that comment?
That's
interesting. Yeah, well said.
Nice. So this is the payload that gets handed to my Lambda function. All of this data is available to me in my Lambda function, right? So something I'm going to pull out of this to add some more content to my post in Slack is the avatar of the user who just starred my repository. And I've cheated because it's already just commented there. I'll just comment it out. So what this will do, it'll add the thumbnail of whoever starred my repository, right? Now, if people want to, they can go in and start this repository right now, and this will appear live in my Slack channel. Oh, I think someone just did it because I just heard it, right?
Yeah, I was just saying, I'm on it.
So someone just did it. Mark start, but I hadn't deployed the avatar yet. But, Mark's just done that straight away, right? So what I'm going to do is I'll go back to my code. That was really quick, Mark, by the way. Good work. I'm going to do another SAM build, and I'm going to redeploy my code. So again, Eric, what we've just done is we've just edited our business logic locally. We've updated our Lambda function locally, and we're going to redeploy it.
Nice. Now, well, I guess it's beyond the scope of what we're talking about here, but it is possible to test that locally as well. But
it is. And that's blog post number 4, which will be coming out next week.
I'm giving away the secrets. I apologize.
No, you're good.
That one's exactly on me.
Right.
Alrighty. Then I can't find the GitHub repo. It's in the blog, right?
Yeah, it's at, if you go to blog post 1, it's at the first link at the very top.
Took me a moment. Sorry.
Let me just deploy this then. Hopefully we can deploy this before you go ahead. And what we'll do is we'll have this ready.
Okay, I'm starting it. Oh, well, when you're ready, I'll start.
Let's wait for this to go to be posted up.
All right.
So you're right. Normally, I would test this code locally for stuff like syntax errors. I could test all of this locally actually because it's using Axios package, right? So I could just run Node with some sort of harness on this. And this is what blog post 4 is about, to show how you test this locally. And then I can do it something called SAM local, test it against sort of a Lambda mock-up of a Lambda execution environment. And then I can test it in my cloud environment against other managed services, right? That's my developer workflow. Yeah. So that's deployed. Someone's just done that. Someone's waited for that.
Yeah.
There we go.
I'm going for it.
There's his avatar.
And Eric? Yeah, also, I'll point out, hang on, I'm starting it right now. Boom, done.
There we go. Okay. There's you.
Look at that. Mark Starcart, you had said SAM Local Invoke still in beta. No, it's actually GA. SAM Local Invoke is GA. SAM Local Invoke for CDK, and I just said a package name, but there it is. CDK is in beta. So, but yeah, the actual SAM Local is in live. But I made it past the 30-minute mark, so Ben, I won. I'm just saying.
Yeah, we're in the clear now.
Yep.
We're in the clear. Yep. You can say some service names. Okay, so recap, right? We've just edited our business logic. We've edited our Lambda function. We've deployed it. We've seen it work live from, some of our viewers have helped us out with that, which is great. Yeah. So what we haven't talked about yet is this front door to the application. How are we accessing this business logic, right? We've just sort of taken it for granted that we're accessing it. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to get that Slack webhook off the screen. Oh.
So you tell me if this is jumping ahead, Ben, and I think it is, but I'm going to say it anyway. So we've got some questions about, someone said, let's get a unit test on that for that access call, unit test for a remote call. Are you going to touch on that at all a little bit?
What's the question exactly?
I'm talking about doing unit tests, yeah.
Yes, so the next blog post is about that. I'm not going to touch on that on this. We've only got 25 minutes or so. I haven't gone into that. But so the next 3 blog posts in this series is all about testing locally, when to deploy to the cloud to test in the cloud against your managed services, when to use SAM local versus just testing your business logic locally, running a Node application test. So all that's covered in the next 3 blog posts. It's essentially the developer workflow. Yeah.
Nice. I'm excited for that.
So let's go into part 3. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll jump back into the blog post for part 3 because I think it's got a nice little diagram here. So part 3 is all about the front door. Like, how are we accessing this business logic? And how can we extend it to do a different thing based on a different event, right? So normally what you would do if you were doing this the traditional way is you just go into your Lambda function. You would maybe test the inbound payload and say, okay, if the inbound payload said something about the repository being starred, then this is the event. This is what I want you to post to Slack. If it said something about the repository being forked, then this is what I want you to post to Slack. And you would just add code to your Lambda function as you go, right? That's not the serverless way really of doing it. I mean, it's fine, but there's reasons why you can do that a different way. And that's what this next blog post explains. So this diagram, I think, is pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Is you would, in a sort of traditional application, you'd have all your routing logic in the code. You would maybe, I'm thinking of like a PHP monolith, like a Laravel application where you catch every inbound request, and then you have like a router.php which routes that request off to some sort of controller or some other bit of script which handles.
In America,
that
that's a router. I think some folks might have been confused, but yeah.
Sorry about that for speaking proper English. My mistake.
Nice. That was well done. An apology and an insult. Well done.
The British way, isn't it?
That is the British way. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So normally I would sort of in a traditional application, I'd just build that all into the code, right? But with serverless, remember we're handing off things to managed services, so our code is less essentially, and there's other benefits to this as well, like the security benefits, the scaling benefits, but we won't dive into this. Cost benefits, exactly. Yeah.
One thing I would, and I'm not going to dive into, but I would touch on this. If you think about the way this is going on the left side, I always call this, monolith lambda or mono lambda or fat lambda or however you want to say. But the idea of running a lambda and doing all this logic that's unneeded, it might be quick, but milliseconds they add up. Over months and months and months and months. And Lambda builds on a millisecond, and so if I can just invoke and do just enough logic that's needed, like shown on the right side, eventually I save money on that. So thinking
it's more complex too. There's more that can go wrong. If you have an error in your code when you've extended it, the whole thing's potentially broken, right? Whereas if you do this a different way by creating a new Lambda function and adding a new way of routing to that Lambda function external from your business logic, then your application is less brittle, right? It's a more robust application.
Remember, if all else fails, then code.
Nice.
But there's other ways to do it, exactly.
So what we've actually done is we've used another service, which Eric also happens to be a subject matter expert on, which is Amazon API Gateway. And this has, actually, Eric, do you want to explain quickly what this has done in our application? You might do a better job than me.
Yeah, so by introducing Amazon API Gateway, what we're doing is, like Ben said, moving a lot of the logic out, specifically the routing logic. Amazon API Gateway, by just simply adding a route, and this is a REST API, right? So by simply adding / I think in your diagram above you show / star / whatever. Now, instead of my Lambda function having to do any evaluation of an event coming in, it's going to know, because I've pushed that routing back to the endpoint, it's going to know this is a star. I don't have to do any deciphering to figure out what it is. When you go beyond that, then what we're able to do is you could say, okay, so let's talk some other things, authorization. It used to be we would handle authorization inside of our application, but now I can push it to a central location on API Gateway. I can use an authorizer there, throttling, caching, and I could go on and on and on. But what happens is you start removing a lot of, I'm going to say it, undifferentiated heavy lifting in your code and move it out to simple checkboxes or simple configurations in your API Gateway. So quit writing routing code.
So what we're going to do now is we already have one API Gateway endpoint that's configured to invoke our Lambda function when it receives an inbound post request from GitHub when a repository is started. That's the whole process of our application, right? We're going to create another API gateway endpoint for a different type of event when a repository is pushed to or like committed to. No, push is the right word. So when a repository receives a push, this will send a post request to a different endpoint, and that endpoint will invoke a different Lambda function, and that Lambda function will post something else slightly different to our Slack webhook URL. So let's try and set this up.
All right. While you're doing that, we had another comment from Alper, and just in addition to what we said, is that there were way more star. So this is a really good call out on breaking it out. Is there were way more star operations compared to fork actions. Then you've separated the Lambda functions. I'm not going to tell Chris Munge you said Lambdas, but he will come and tackle you, especially with the lowercase Lambdas. You can just scale the specific Lambda function, and that's exactly right. That is the heart of event-driven and single responsibility. And I said heavy lifting. Go ahead.
And crucially, the Lambda function scales on its own, right? You're not doing anything extra for that. It's just happening.
Right.
Okay. So
Alexa, stop. So, I thought I was muted. Sorry about that. I set off my Alexa and she was telling me some story or something. So I thought I was muted. Sorry about that.
No problem. So I'm in folder or directory part 3 of my application now. And what I've just done there is I've uncommented some infrastructure as code definition, which defines a new Lambda function and a new API gateway endpoint. Now that's a lot if you've never heard of infrastructure as code or CloudFormation SAN templates. Essentially, this YAML, this code that you see here, is just defining a new Lambda function and a new API gateway endpoint to invoke that Lambda function. Okay, we won't go into more detail at this point. That'll be handed in a future blog post. And what you can see now is I have 2 folders. One folder holds the Lambda function code for a star event, and the other folder holds the Lambda function code for a push event, right? So let's have a look at this push event. It's very similar. What I would have done is just copy the other folder, renamed it, and then slightly change my app.js to say a new push has been made, and maybe I pulled out a few different parts of the payload, right? So that's all that this is going to do. I'm going to redeploy this now as part 3. Go through this again. All of this is the same. Okay, that should be going. So what this will produce, this will show me an output with 2 API gateway endpoints, right? I'm repeating myself. One is going to invoke the Lambda function that we want to invoke when something is starred, and the other will invoke the Lambda function when something is pushed. Then I'm going to go back into GitHub. I'm going to create a new webhook event for when something is pushed, and I will provide that event with the new API gateway URL for a push event. Okay? Questions, Eric?
Yeah, well, I'm going to clarify something really quick. It's 2 paths on the same endpoint, right?
2 paths, yes. Same endpoint, yes. Different path, yes.
Right. So, yeah, I want to clarify to our listeners that Sam is smart enough, serverless. We're only one instantiation of API gateway, one endpoint, 2 paths. So just /push, /star, same API gateway endpoint.
I mean, what you said there is correct. What this should be really is /star, but I was lazy and just left that as the root endpoint, and this one is /push.
Yeah. And we actually, and I didn't see this to prompt it, but we actually had a question. I had a question. How does Sam know that it should not create a new API and just use it? So Sam will use any API references that are not declared as separate, like named, create a new one, will all be added to the same API gateway. You can have multiple APIs in the same template, but they are all put on the same endpoint unless you specifically declare a separate one.
Okay. Eric, can you see here? Here's my outputs with my two paths, and you can see like the endpoint, the stem, the root of that endpoint is the same. Right. This one is /push, and this one doesn't have a path, I suppose you would say. So back to GitHub. Over here, I've clicked on webhooks. I'm adding a new webhook, and here I give it my push webhook payload URL. I need to tell it it's a JSON formatted payload, and I'm going to select an individual event, which will be on pushes. Oh, it's already selected for me. Lovely.
Nice.
Add that webhook. Okay, so in theory now, I should be able to just make a push to this repository, right? So I'll do something trivial like change something in the README. Let's add some, that'll do.
That'll do.
Now, I didn't hear that. I don't think that's worked. That's interesting. Let's see what happened. Maybe it didn't deploy properly, or maybe I didn't save it properly. That's there. Let's go back to my settings, see what the response was. You can see here it's failed, right? So we can see the response. Application JSON, that looks, maybe I've got some white spaces here. No. Have a look in here.
In the comments, someone said, Mark Starcart is saying add a star push, but I don't think that's, I don't know how that would apply, but.
What I can think of is there's maybe something in my Lambda function code that is untested. Maybe I added something that is not working. So that's when I would test my business logic locally, right? And then I would redeploy. Might not have time to go through that in this bit.
Yeah, so I could tell you by looking at that, the fact that you got an internal server error, that means that the Lambda function was invoked, right? So this would be if it were a security issue or, it couldn't find it, 404, but that's really helpful. And yeah, you could actually do you know the name of that function? I know we don't want to spend time, but I'd like to show someone this.
Sure, yeah.
So if you go to a console and just do, can you bring up another console?
Yep, hang on a sec. Let me.
And Ben already knows this. I'm not teaching Ben anything he doesn't know. But I was going to have you do SAM logs on that function name. You can just do it to the stack if you want, if you know the stack name.
Let me just bring it up in another browser.
Alrighty.
Oh, I'm not on the company network and stuff.
Well, that's all right.
I might lose internet if I go on VPN. Am I going to be good?
No, don't go on VPN. You can do SAM logs without VPN, just from your console.
Oh, should we do SAM logs?
Okay, yeah, SAM logs.
Yeah. Do it that way. Hang on then. Let's do it.
Yeah, that's Alper was asking about that, and it'd be interesting to show someone, how that works. And maybe I'm going out of scope, and you can tell me to be quiet. But yeah, SAM logs. And then, do you know then space dash stack dash name?
Stack name is what was it? SAM. It's in here, isn't it?
Yep.
That one.
There you go. No. Actually, type out the word stack name. So stack dash name. And then you need to go before you hit enter. Go to the end and do dash in because we got to give it the logical name of the function. And so the name of the function is webhook.
N.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I don't remember what you call it.
We're getting ourselves into it here, aren't we? We're going for it.
Yeah. There you go. Push web handler. There you go. And if this doesn't work, that's fine. But I just want to show someone what this does. And there you go. There's your error.
Okay. I know what. I didn't do SAM build. So it's not found the Axios package, right?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So SAM build actually. Yep. SAM build's going to actually. Ben doesn't have to maintain all the packages inside of his projects, inside of each function. When he does SAM build, it actually builds it all out and loads up all the local ones. So you should just be able to do SAM deploy.
Yeah, but I'm trying to stick to what was in the blog post instructions.
Oh, gotcha.
People,
all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, they'll think I'm cheating.
So Alper asked npmi. Now, SAM build will actually do that for you. So one of the handy things of using SAM is it will as long as the package has all your package is up to date, SAM build will actually do that. And if you see kind of grayed out, he's got a folder called .aws-sam, and that's where the actual build results are with all the dependencies.
It's also worth saying as well, in my package.json, here's where I've listed this dependency, the Axios module. So Axios is the module that I use in my Lambda function code to post out to Slack, right? So it's in my dependencies, but I didn't do a SAM build. So my Lambda function in my AWS account hadn't imported that NPM node module.
That's right. So Alpha also asked if SAM deploy calls SAM build. It does not. You need to do the SAM build on your own. So,
and that actually gets me more often than it should. Imagine a lot of people get caught by that. Yeah. Okay, so look, I'm just going to do another commit just so we can, see this working. We hope, right?
Look at us fixing things on the fly. Here
we go. A new push has been made. So that's what we've just built. There is the whole thing. This right now we have a path for each Lambda function, and we can go on. That's how we'd extend it. I would just copy that infrastructure as code block, copy the Lambda function code, make a new directory, and I could just add events for each individual type of GitHub action.
That's right. Great. This is so helpful. If you've never seen this build, and Ben's incredibly good at just pulling these together. Some questions coming in. I'm going to see if we've got any. Ben, did you have something else you're still showing? Or do you want to get questions?
There's one other thing I wanted to show, and it won't take long, right? So just this morning, in preparation for this, I just asked the same group of people on Twitter what would be a tip that they would give people that are new to serverless, right? What would they pass on? And I think there's some really useful stuff, right? So learn. This is Matt. Matt's one of our serverless, one of the serverless heroes. Set up CDK Day.
Yep.
He says learn IAM because native security patterns are key to serverless implementations.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack there, but essentially IAM is Identity Access Manager, and this is how you make sure your service applications are nice and secure. And it's, again, a managed service, and it's super mature, super in-depth. So becoming an expert at IAM policies and principles is very useful. Start with a small, medium-sized system. First, a few functions, work directly on the console UI. I'm not sure I would opt for that, but he says then adopt a framework. Language selection based on your team or company's expertise. Be cognizant of request and response payload limits.
And I want to speak to that real quick. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll speak to that real quick. I agree with Ben. Console's a great way to look at it. Think about that as you build one thing at a time. I'll build my Lambda. Yeah. Now I go over to my API gateway. Now I connect them, things like that. If you never touch serverless, look at the console. It's great. They've done some great work there. But as fast as you can get to a framework, and much like Nurse, I'm sorry if I pronounce her name wrong. I can't see it. I'm doing my old man. I'm literally looking at my dad in the camera. So move that. Sorry, Ben. Go ahead.
It's exactly what you said, right? Once you've built more than 2 Lambda functions, then it's going to get you want to get out of the console because it becomes disparate and spread out, and that's why you need a framework, an infrastructure as code like SAM that we just looked at. And again, start small. I'm just going to read out a couple more, Eric. That's all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Yep. So there's a few recommendations to start small with functions and then add more functions as you go, add more services as you go. This is a really good point as well. You can go really far before you need crazy architectures. And that's really true. You can do so much before things actually get complicated. Another one here, this is Rob Sutter. Reach for managed services before writing code. This minimizes your code liability and lets you deliver faster. Great. Brilliant. Use Lambda Power Tools and embrace structured login from the start. Learn a few things deeply, then try to learn the basics learn a few things deeply as opposed to learning the basics of too many services. Have each dev on your team pick 3 with some healthy overlap. That's great.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah. Endeavor to run your code locally. Lambdas are okay. I agree with that. I think Lambdas are okay. I talk a lot about that in the serverless LAMP stack, right? Running PHP on Lambda. Step functions are great. Tooling is hard, he says. SAM or CDK can help deployments.
See, I think I would debate you on that a little bit. On the Lambda-lits. Yeah. I think they're a migration point, but I don't think they're a stopping point.
No, I agree. Yeah. No challenge.
Right.
No challenge on that. I think it's a great first step. Yeah. Use the batch version of everything. Yeah, fair, because of the enhanced scalability. So that's it, right? I think that's all great advice from people that have gone through the learning process and are like running fast with serverless now. Okay. Question, Derek, if there's any left.
I think we're okay. I'm putting in some links here to help you with some of the stuff we've talked about. One is I heavily encourage you to check out serverlesslane.com. Putting that right now. Really important. We had a comment. I'll just put it up here. I haven't actually read it yet. It says another benefit of separate Lambda functions, you can trim your dependencies. Yeah, absolutely, to the absolute minimum that your function needs. Yeah. I mean, that's good hygiene, right? That's good application hygiene. We look at things like least amount of dependencies required to run this function, least amount of privileges required for that function to do its job. It's always about the least amount, limited, granular scoping, granular attention to detail, and that's not a serverless thing. That's just a development thing, right? So.
Yeah.
So do we have another question here? So say you have a static front end that calls your API gateway endpoint. When I recreate the stack API endpoint URL changes, I need to update the URL on the front end. How can I automate that? I wouldn't automate that. I would use a custom domain. So the API gateways. I'm sorry, Ben. Did you want to answer? Do you have a different answer?
No, I was maybe I misunderstood. I was wondering why the stack API endpoint URL changes.
Yeah, well, if you take down, let's say you're testing, and if you take down, let's say you, for some reason, normally it won't have to, right? When you do SAM deploy, as long as you're not making major changes to the API gateway, like going from REST API to HTTP API, once you deploy it once, API gateway generally won't have to be rebuilt. But if for some reason you do, this is a great reason to use custom domains. Custom domains, because you don't want to give somebody your, ridiculously long 722 character domain name. Say, good luck. You want to use a custom domain name under that, and API Gateway supports custom domain name. You do your SSL right there, custom domain name, and then you can do multi-level base path mapping even at the custom domain before you even hit your API Gateway. So there's a lot of flexibility, but the bottom line is use a custom domain if you think your API is going to change and you need to repoint it. That I will say, and I know time-wise, I think we're actually okay. This is a great, if you're migrating something over and you're adding more, custom domain with changeable paths, it's a great way. It's called strangler pattern. You can start pulling things out and redirecting them. So, you bet. We have another question. At the end of the build, go update this URL. All right. So Alper, that's just an extension of what you were asking. Yeah. So I guess the bottom line for me, if you find yourself writing a lot of custom automation scripts, you might be doing it wrong. So just evaluate that.
Maybe some environment variables might be something that would help with that as well, right?
Yep. Exactly.
Be deploying to different environments. Yeah, exactly.
Central location, again, like a secrets manager or parameter store or something like that. Ben, we had another question come in. I'm working with NX monorepo and have been wanting to integrate NX with serverless framework. Not a question, but is this something that you've come across while consulting? I'm not familiar with the NX framework.
I don't know what NX is. It's not Next, is it? Next framework?
Next.
JS? I'm not sure what NX is. No, I don't know.
Yeah. So, all right. One last comment. Great blog series, Ben. I'll recommend it to new devs. I'll say again, Ben, and I'm going to shut up and let you talk for a minute. But Ben is prolific at this. He puts out phenomenal material, and he's really turned his attention to this idea of I'm brand new to this, and so if you're new to serverless, or if you're an expert in serverless, Ben's stuff is always worth reading. So,
one thing I found really difficult, right? When you start at AWS, especially, everyone is just running really fast. They've gone through this sort of learning. Have we got time, Eric, or are we done?
No, we're good. We're good. I don't think we have anybody after us, so we're good.
Everyone is so into their particular area of expertise and so knowledgeable on it that it becomes like this echo chamber internally where you're just talking to people who are super advanced, and it becomes so difficult to step out of that and to sort of come back and go, okay, what did this look like before I began?
Yeah.
And then once you do that, you see everything is really difficult again. Like every conversation you have, you see, okay, it's like a different language. And it becomes really apparent very quickly. But shifting your mindset back to a sort of starting out again is actually really difficult. And I think that's why we haven't seen a lot of new 100 level content in the last couple of years, right? Because people are just running so fast with this now.
Yeah. Nick clarified for us. Nick NX monorepo is a build tool that supports sharing code between JS projects. Think of MV Envar. Okay. All right. All right. So Nick, and I don't have an example of this, but I can give you some guidelines on this. If you want to use NX, I'm assuming it's a script runner that you can use, something like that. One of the things built into SAM is custom builds. And I posted a link earlier called Sessions or it's S12D, and I'll post it again just so you have it. S12D.com/sessions with Sam. I have a whole series, like 20 episodes or so, called Sessions with Sam, and I show you how to build a custom build. And it uses a make file, and so you can still just do SAM build, and it'll run your NX however you want to do that kind of stuff. If it can be run from a command line. So lots of, I've even built Swift applications in serverless using the custom build so that I could just use standard SAM build every time, but it's building, Swift stuff. So there's lots of power in that. All righty. CDK, I have someone mentioning CDK. Cool thing about CDK, it's just a different way of declaring your resources. You can still use SAM. It's in beta right now, but you still use SAM to do your build and all that and local testing. So CDK, SAM, you choose. Just use a framework. Can you guys come up with something on like 500 level content? Yes, Ben could. Yeah,
give it a go.
We've got some. I'll tell you, we've built some stuff. The S12D that you're looking at, the URL shortener, that is a lambda-less, no-code URL shortener that talks to DynamoDB, uses CloudFront. It's all built with a single SAM file. I don't know if that's 500, but it's not 200. So and so there's complexity there.
The FreshTrack stuff,
yes,
that's getting up there. MyFreshTracks.com is an application with their serverless backend that shows how you can integrate with external SaaS partners using EventBridge, and that goes pretty deep on all sorts of interesting topics. MyFreshTracks.com.
Yep.
Yeah.
Really cool. Well,
in fact,
we are. Go ahead, Ben.
I'm just going to say, if you go to serverlessland.com, you look at all the different blog posts and the different code samples and learning paths there, you could definitely find some sort of high 400 level content, right? There's loads of stuff there.
Awesome. All right. Serverless machine learning. We are doing that in about 3 weeks. We'll be showing you how to do inference and machine learning on serverless. So Mark Starkart, thanks for bringing that up. Great segue. So I will put one other link in here, and that is s12d.com/ office hours. This is a full schedule of everything we're going to be covering. We will be back on Twitch next week. So we encourage you every Tuesday, same time, same place. And Ben, thanks, dude. I always love hanging out with you. Yeah, this is a blast. So, and with that, I think we're out. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll repost this it's already on YouTube now, and we appreciate it. Thanks all.
Bye-bye.